"You should have signed for the 28,000, Mark Voss hissed. His voice crawled down into the basement of Nora Price's dead father's fortified farmhouse. He thought he was walking into a dark room to steal a briefcase full of cash. He thought his private equity boss had already broken her. They had taken her house, drained her accounts, poisoned her custody case, and left her with a 7-year-old daughter and nowhere to sleep. Also, she would sell a forgotten mountain farm for whatever they offered. But Mark did not know the land was sitting on a sealed helium reserve worth more than $100 million, and he did not see Nora's shaking hand under the desk. He did not see her thumb lifting the clear plastic cover over the red federal lockdown switch. He thought he had cornered a desperate single mother. He had actually stepped into the only room her father built for men exactly like him. Nora Price had been divorced for 9 days when the last notice appeared on her apartment door. Not mailed, not emailed, nailed. A white paper square, crooked from the hammer blow, telling her she had 10 days to vacate the duplex she had been renting outside Pittsburgh. Her landlord had written the note in polite language. Mark's lawyer had not. The bank accounts were frozen pending final asset review. The custody transfer hearing had been moved up. The house in Mount Lebanon, the retirement fund, even the used minivan had somehow been tied into Mark's new business debts. Nora was 35 years old. She had a child asleep on a mattress on the floor. She had $43 in her checking account. And the man who had promised to love her through anything was now living in a condo downtown with a woman who posted photos from his balcony like she had won a prize. Nora sat cross-legged on the bare floor after midnight, packing the last of her father's things into a cracked laundry basket. Calvin Rowe had died 4 months earlier in the break room of a freight elevator repair shop. A quiet man, a stubborn man, a man who saved screws in coffee cans, wore boots until the soles split, and never once has asked anybody to feel sorry for him. He had raised Nora alone after her mother left. He taught her how to change a tire, how to read a bill before signing it, and how to stand still when someone richer tried to make her feel small. All he left behind was a work jacket, 2 union pins, a chipped thermos, and an old brass lunch pail from the steel mill. Nora almost threw the lunch pail into the donation box. Then she heard something inside it move. She turned it over in her hands. The bottom was heavier than it should have been. A seam ran along the inside, so fine she only noticed it when the kitchen bulb caught the edge. Her father had built false panels for elevators half his life. Of course he would know how to hide one. Nora slid a butter knife under the lip and pried. The panel popped loose with a dry click. Inside was a waxed envelope, folded tight, sealed in clear plastic, and marked in her father's block handwriting. For Nora, not before you need it. Her hands went cold. Inside the envelope was a deed, not a photocopy, not a family story. A recorded warranty deed from Hartwell County, West Virginia, dated April 7, 1989. 63 acres, 2 barns, a stone farmhouse, timber rights, water rights, subsurface rights. The property name was Blackglass Hollow. Nora read the page 3 times, because the words refused to fit the life she knew. Her father had slept in a rented 1-bedroom above a radiator shop for 20 years. He had never owned a new car. He had never gone on vacation. And all that time, he had owned a mountain farm with mineral rights locked under his name. Attached to the deed was a tax receipt. Then another, and another. 37 years of property taxes, paid through a blind account under initials Nora did not recognize. The last payment had cleared 2 weeks before Calvin died. Why would you hide this from me? The empty apartment gave no answer. By 3 in the morning, Nora had found the county parcel map on her cracked phone. Blackglass Hollow existed. It was not a rumor. It was not a clerical error. A green rectangle on a ridge above the Tug Fork River belonged to Calvin Rowe. And now legally, it belonged to her by sunrise. Nora had made the kind of decision fear only lets you make once. She stopped packing boxes for eviction. She packed for escape. 2 duffel bags, a grocery sack of medicine, her daughter's school folder, the deed, folded inside her coat. At 6:18 a.m., she buckled Ava into the back seat of the sedan and drove south through rain. Ava was still half asleep, clutching a stuffed fox against her cheek. "Are we going to Grandpa's?" she mumbled. Nora looked at the road. "I think Grandpa left us a place," she said. She just did not yet know what kind of place. The drive into Hartwell County took 6 hours and felt like falling backward through the country. Concrete turned to wet blacktop. Wet blacktop turned to 2-lane roads. The hills tightened around them until the cell signal blinked out and the trees pressed so close that branches scratched the car doors. Nora's first stop was the county recorder's office, a squat brick building beside a courthouse with a broken clock tower. Inside, a woman in a cardigan looked up from a ledger.
"Can I help you?"
Nora slid the old deed beneath the glass. "My father passed away. I need to confirm whether this property is active." The woman's nameplate read Edna Kincaid. She scanned the deed with the bored patience of someone who had seen 1,000 family disputes over fence lines and cemetery plots. Then she reached the name Calvin Rowe. Her stopped. Her face changed, not much, but enough. Nora had learned to notice the moment a room turned against the truth. Edna lowered her voice. "You're his daughter?" "Yes. Did anyone know you were coming?" Nora opened her mouth to answer. Before she could, the office door behind her swung open. A man in a charcoal overcoat stepped inside like he owned the building. Late 50s, silver hair, clean hands, a face built for sympathy and practiced until it had no warmth left in it. Edna's shoulders tightened. "Mr. Barron." Nora looked at the deed. The notary stamp from 1989 carried the same name, Silas Barron. He smiled before he reached the counter. "Nora Price," he said. "Calvin's girl. I wondered when you might turn up." Nora did not shake the hand he offered. "You knew my father?" "I represented certain local interests involving that parcel," Barron said. "Your father was difficult. Admirable in his way, but difficult." He tapped the deed with one polished fingernail. "Blackglass Hollow is a problem property." "A problem how?" Barron sighed. "Old mine drainage. Sinkholes, contaminated wells, unstable access road. Frankly, the county should have condemned it years ago. Calvin kept it for sentimental reasons. He was that kind of man." Nora had spent the last year listening to men lie in voices that sounded reasonable. Mark used that voice in mediation. His attorney used it before asking the judge to restrict Nora's emergency spending. Now Silas Barron was using it over a piece of land he claimed was worthless, while standing too close to a deed he had no right to touch. He reached into his coat and removed an envelope. "I can spare you a great deal of trouble. $28,000, cashier's check. Today. You sign the transfer, you walk away from liability, and you get a clean start with your daughter." Nora looked at the envelope. $28,000 could stop the eviction. It could pay a retainer. It could put Ava in a bed that was not an air mattress. For 1 weak second, Nora's whole body leaned toward yes. Then she heard her father's voice in memory. "Read before signing." "No," she said. Barron's smile thinned. "Excuse me? I need to see it first. That road is unsafe. It's my road." Mrs. Price, desperation makes people sentimental. Nora folded the deed and put it back inside her coat. "Then I guess I'm sentimental." She took Ava's hand and walked out before her knees could betray her. Behind her, Silas Barron did not raise his voice. He did not threaten her. He simply made a phone call. The map attached to the deed led them 13 miles into the hills. The paved road ended. The gravel road narrowed. Then came a logging track cut between hemlocks, slick with rain and rutted deep enough to scrape the car's undercarriage. Ava watched through the back window, silent now. At the ridge top, the track ended at a steel gate. Not an old farm gate. A new one. Black powder-coated steel. Fresh hinges. A keypad box mounted on a cedar post. Nora stepped out into the cold rain. The gate chain was locked, but the lock was not old. Someone had been here recently. Someone who did not own it. Nora stood in the mud, holding the deed in one hand and a tire iron in the other. The first blow rang through the trees. The second split the lock housing. The third broke it open. The gate swung inward with a groan. A quarter-mile later, the trees parted. Blackglass Hollow rose from the mist. Nora forgot to breathe. The farmhouse was made of dark fieldstone and timber, perched above a basin of wet pasture and abandoned orchard rows. 2 barns leaned at the far edge of the property. A spring house sat near a creek. It should have looked forgotten. It did not. The grass was cut in clean strips. The gravel had fresh tire marks. Every first-floor window had steel shutters recessed into the frame. The front door was not wood. It was a reinforced slab with a commercial keypad and a deadbolt big enough for a bank. Under the eaves, small black cameras blinked red in the rain. Ava whispered from the car, "Mom?" Nora forced her voice steady. "Stay buckled. Lock the doors. If I wave, you honk 3 times." She climbed the porch steps. There was no welcome mat, no planter, no decoration, just a steel door and a keypad. Nora stared at it. Her father hated obvious passwords, but he loved dates that meant something. She typed Ava's birthday. Nothing. She typed her own. Nothing. Then, with a swallow, she typed the date her mother left. The date Calvin had always pretended not to remember, 04121998. The keypad flashed green. The house opened. Inside, the air was stale but clean. No dust, no rot, no smell of animals. Someone had kept the place alive. The living room looked less like a vacation house than a command post disguised as one. Leather sofa, wood stove, emergency radio, canned food stacked behind pantry glass. A wall of maps, Hartwell County, pipeline easements, water tables, old mine shafts. And pinned beside them were photographs, not of the farm, of Nora, of Ava, at the grocery store, at the courthouse, outside the duplex, Mark getting into his SUV downtown. Some photos were recent enough that Nora recognized the coat Ava had worn the week before. Nora staggered back. Her father had not abandoned her. He had been watching the people around her, or paying someone to watch them. At the end of the hallway, a door stood open. A blue glow leaked from beneath it. Nora descended the stairs. The basement was not a basement. It was a bunker. Concrete walls, server racks, battery banks, monitors showing every camera angle around the property. A steel security door at the top track, currently raised. A red switch in a plastic case mounted beneath the desk. Above it, a label in block letters. Federal lockdown. Witness Beacon. Nora reached for the desk to steady herself. That was when she saw the briefcase. It sat open under the monitors, filled with banded cash, not a few bills, stacks. Beside the cash was a flash drive, a ledger, and a sealed letter. Nora recognized the handwriting before she picked it up. "Nora, if you are reading this, I failed to tell you in time. Do not call Mark. Do not trust Barron. Do not leave the property without the ledger. Lock the house." The ceiling above her creaked. Once. Then again. Heavy footsteps crossed the living room. Nora froze, the letter shaking in her hand. A man's voice called from upstairs. "Nora?" It was Mark, not worried, not surprised. Amused. Her ex-husband stepped onto the top stair and let the light from his phone sweep down the concrete walls. "I saw your car," he said. "You always were terrible at hiding." Nora backed into the shadow between the server racks. Mark came down slowly. Expensive jacket, clean boots. The face he wore in court when he wanted everyone to believe he was the stable parent. "Barron said you got emotional at the recorder's office," Mark said. "He tried to help you. You should have taken the 28. Nora's mouth went dry. "You knew." Mark smiled. "Baby, I knew before you did. The words went through her like a blade. The frozen accounts, the eviction, the custody pressure, the impossible legal bills, it had all been a funnel. A machine built to make one broke woman sign away land she did not understand. Nora unfolded the rest of her father's letter under the blue monitor light. I was never only an elevator mechanic. For 12 years I audited shell companies for Vail Meridian Energy through a contractor account. Barron used Hartwell County as a dumping ground and hid the money through worker pension funds. Blackglass Hollow sits above the clean aquifer that proves the contamination trail. Beneath the ridge is a sealed helium reserve they cannot legally access unless they control our water and subsurface rights. Vail's last internal valuation was $112 million. I bought the farm to block them. I kept paying taxes because one honest deed can stop a dirty empire if the right person refuses to sign. There is enough evidence in this room to bury them, but only if the beacon is triggered from inside the house. Mark reached the basement floor. His flashlight hit the open briefcase. For a second, greed stripped his face bare. "Well," he said, almost laughing. "Old Calvin really did keep emergency money." He stepped toward it. Nora's thumb found the plastic cover over the red switch. Mark saw her move. His smile vanished. "Don't do that." Nora lifted the cover. "Nora." He lunged. She slammed her palm down. The house erupted. Red strobes flashed across the concrete. A siren tore through the walls. At the top of the stairs, the security door dropped from the ceiling and slammed into the floor with a boom that shook dust from the joists. Mark spun around. "What did you do?" Nora snatched the flash drive, the ledger, the letter, and the briefcase. "I'm reading before signing." Mark charged, but the basement had one more secret. Behind the server racks was a narrow steel hatch marked Springhouse Exit. Her father had drawn a chalk arrow on the wall. For Nora. She threw the bolt, shoved the hatch open, and crawled into cold night air as Mark's fist struck the metal behind her. Nora came out behind the Springhouse, soaked in rain, mud to her knees, briefcase cutting into her palm. Ava was screaming inside the sedan. Nora ran. "Mommy, I'm here. Unlock it." She threw the briefcase and evidence onto the passenger seat, slammed the door, and started the engine. The sedan fishtailed in wet gravel. She reached the driveway. Then headlights appeared at the gate. 2 black SUVs rolled in and blocked the only way out. Mark had not come alone. Silas Barron stepped from the lead vehicle with an umbrella raised over his silver hair. Behind him were 4 men in dark security jackets. No badges, no hesitation. Barron walked toward Nora's window as if the siren, the rain, and the armed men were all part of a transaction he had rehearsed. "Mrs. Price," he called over the alarm. "Open the door. This can still end civilly." Ava sobbed in the back seat. Nora locked the doors. Barron looked toward the farmhouse, then back at her. His smile twitched. The lockdown was supposed to trap her. It had trapped Mark instead. Barron raised one hand. The security men started forward. Then the ridge lit up. Not with lightning, with white light. A search beam opened from above, flattening every shadow in the pasture. The sound came next, heavy and violent, chopping the night apart. A black helicopter dropped over the ridgeline, nose angled toward the farmhouse. Across its side, in white block letters, was the seal of the Department of Justice. 3 armored federal vehicles burst through the lower road seconds later, throwing mud in sheets. Agents poured out with rifles raised. Federal agents, hands visible. "Step away from the vehicle." Barron's umbrella slipped from his hand. For the first time, his face looked old. Not powerful, old. One of his security men reached under his jacket. A red dot appeared on his chest. He froze. The others dropped to their knees. Silas Barron tried to speak. 2 agents put him face first against the hood of his own SUV and cuffed him before he finished the first sentence. Nora watched through the windshield, shaking so hard she could barely hold the wheel. Then the farmhouse door opened. Two agents dragged Mark across the porch. His perfect jacket was torn. His hair was full of dust. He was talking fast, begging faster, trying to explain that he was only there to protect his daughter from an unstable ex-wife. Then he saw Nora, and he saw the briefcase on the passenger seat, and every lie in his mouth died at once. A woman in a navy rain jacket approached the sand with both hands visible. She held her badge against the glass. "Nora Price? I'm Special Agent Mara Keene, Department of Justice. Your father was a protected cooperating witness. We lost contact with him 4 months ago. The beacon confirms you activated his evidence chain." Nora lowered the window halfway. Rain blew across her face. "My daughter," Nora said. "Is she safe?" Agent Keene looked into the back seat and softened. "She is now." The words broke something in Nora. Not because everything was fixed. It was not. There would be hearings, indictments, news vans, custody motions, men in suits trying to explain why they had only followed instructions. But none of them held the deed anymore. None of them held the water rights. None of them held the only clean proof left in Hartwell County. Nora looked at the farmhouse through the rain. The steel shutters, the cameras, the locked basement. All those years. She had thought her father owned nothing because life had taken everything from him. Now she understood. Calvin Rowe had not lived poor because he had nothing. He had lived quietly because he was guarding the one thing the powerful men could not buy. By morning, Silas Barron was in federal custody. Mark Voss was charged with conspiracy, attempted coercion, and obstruction tied directly to the evidence chain he had walked downstairs to steal. Vale Meridian's valuation files, pension ledgers, and water reports made the first page of every regional paper by the end of the week. The court unfroze Nora's accounts. Her eviction was dismissed. Her custody order was rewritten so fast Mark's attorney stopped answering reporters. And Blackglass Hollow became the center of the largest environmental fraud case Hartwell County had ever seen. 6 months later, Nora stood in the spring house with Ava beside her, watching federal engineers lower a monitoring probe into the clean aquifer her father had protected. One of them told her the helium reservoir would take years to litigate, permit, value, and secure. It was not a lottery ticket. It was bigger than that. It was leverage. It was safety. It was land nobody could bully her off again. Ava tugged Nora's sleeve. "Did Grandpa build all this for us?" Nora looked toward the ridge where rain clouds were breaking open over the pasture. She thought of the hidden lunch pail, the paid taxes, the photographs, the red switch beneath the desk, and the letter that had waited until she needed it. "Yes," Nora said. Then she corrected herself. "No, he built it because he knew one day somebody would come for us." She squeezed Ava's hand. "And he wanted them to find a locked door." The farm they called worthless had never been empty. It had been waiting for the right woman to refuse the check.